Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Podium. I have a very special guest today from I think Arthur, you're from Boston, right? Are you in Boston now?
I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Cambridge,
Yeah,
Massachusetts.
Boston.
Cambridge right away, and I've been to the Boston area a few times. I think I've spent a total of a month in Boston on various occasions if I kind of piece them together. And there's a large Armenian community in the Boston area.
That's right.
Yeah, and Cambridge is, it's close to where I think Alan Hovhannes grew up.
Exactly. I was about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's great, and I actually this is again off topic, but I actually had a chance to talk to his wife a year and a half ago when I was conducting a piece of his with one of my orchestras, and she was very interested in coming out, but I think they live in the south end of Seattle, and my concert was really up north on an island, and she just couldn't make it. But that's one of the things that came to mind. But anyways, we'll go to your career now, and I realized you're a guitarist.
That's right. Or I was a guitarist.
You were a guitarist, and the interesting thing is when I read about various composers or artists, sometimes the instrument that they've played, they tend to incorporate a lot of that instrument. And one thing I realized in looking at the list of compositions, you have two pieces that have a guitar. One of them is a solo piece for guitar, and the other one is a trio, I think.
Yeah, the trio is a rather recent piece. Finally, after so many years of avoiding writing for guitar, I decided to do something. And it's for a kind of impractical group. It's for piccolo, celesta, and guitar.
Uh-huh. Why not write for a guitar? As a guitarist, you would assume that you know the instrument well to compose for it.
Well, I guess so much of my early musical experiences were around, surrounding the guitar. At first, electric guitar, and then steel string guitar, and then finally classical guitar. And I also played flute, Renaissance flute.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that all that time I was not really. When I eventually came to composition, I needed to catch up, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a long process of really getting to know a much broader spectrum of music.
Yeah.
I think the guitar world is rather hermetic, and I just felt like I wasn't participating in mainstream classical music, and I guess that's the main reason I avoided it.
Did you play any rock and roll growing up since you played electric guitar?
Absolutely, yeah, I loved. I mean, my heroes were Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton, and various guitar virtuosi.
Uh-huh.
And I guess I played electric guitar as a teenager and never very well. I played basically with friends. I mean, we never really had a real band. We didn't perform commercially or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when I got to college, I traded in my electric guitar for a steel string, and I was very much into kind of finger-picking style. Leo Kottke, I don't know if you've heard that name.
No. But tell us, that's interesting. Tell us about that.
He's a wonderful player, really fascinating guy, and also the music of Ralph Towner, who was still is maybe, the guitarist of the group called Oregon, kind of a folk rock group, and he also played a classical guitar. So anyway, in college, I guess when I was a sophomore, I borrowed a housemate's classical guitar and just started working on it. I was largely self-taught until a few years later when I finally had some lessons. I think the thing that really swung it for me in terms of classical guitar was that I think when I was a sophomore in college, maybe a freshman, I'm not sure, I heard a performance at my college by a guitarist named Eliot Fisk.
Mm-hmm.
And Fisk is really one of the astounding virtuosos of the instrument. He really is an amazing player. And concert he gave, he received 8 standing ovations.
Wow.
And I mean, the place was packed, and the audience, people were audibly sighing during slow movements. It was just the most musical and technically brilliant performance. One of the best concerts I've ever attended.
And you ended up studying with him, right? Is that correct?
And by some miracle, I ended up studying with him. Yeah.
Yeah. How was that experience to study with such a, first off, an inspiring figure for you and many others, and also someone of that fame and importance for the guitar world?
It was overwhelming. I'd say I don't think I was really prepared. You know, having been largely self-taught, I lacked a solid technique, and you know, it eventually caught up with me. I think I was a frustrated classical guitarist for so many years, and finally decided to give it up, go back to school for composition. Eliot, when he gave that concert, he must have been, he must have been 19 years old or something. He was an undergraduate at Yale. And when he graduated, they immediately asked him to be the first teacher of the instrument at the Yale School of Music. And so that's where I wound up. I was one of 2 players in the first class for the master's program at Yale.
Wow.
Guitar. Anyway.
Does Eliot Fisk still teach at...
Yeah, he teaches he's actually up in this area. He teaches at New England Conservatory now.
Oh, I see. And New England, you studied somewhere in Boston. Was it Boston University?
Boston University.
And how were studies with Bernard Rands, right?
Bernard Rands was my main teacher there. It was wonderful. I mean, he was a wonderful person and a wonderful teacher. He is a wonderful person.
Yeah.
And he's living in Chicago now, but he taught for a number of years at BU before Harvard lured him away.
Yeah. Well, how often and how much do you write every day? You know, there are composers who make it a point to compose for at least a little bit every day. Are you one of those composers, or what's your style? What's your approach to composition?
When I'm into a piece, I'm obsessed, so I often will write 5-6 hours a day, or work 5 or 6 hours a day. It's not like I'm writing.
Yeah.
But I go through some fairly lengthy fallow periods. Nothing much is happening. Yeah. And I feel guilty, of course, when that happens. I think a lot of composers do.
But that's something great, because in the past couple of days I've been, and even up until our talk here just now, I was listening to a lot of your works on YouTube. I was finding a bunch of different recordings and listening to it. And one thing that was interesting is that the pieces have their own voice, their own unique character. And that's something sometimes that's hard for composers to have, because they're so prolific and they compose. And nothing against Alan Hovhaness, for example, someone we've talked about, and this is again my personal opinion, but sometimes you listen to his works, especially if they were composed in the same time period, they're very similar in nature and style, and sometimes even instrumentation. So my dissertation actually was on Armenian orchestral music, and Hovhaness was a big part of it, having the Armenian heritage. And I did realize that sometimes pieces, even the instrumentation is similar for a certain time period. So that's one thing that I really enjoyed about your works, is that every one of them had their own unique voice, and maybe that's because you give space between the pieces.
Well, thanks for that compliment. I don't know. I'm kind of an anal composer, I think.
Yeah.
My pieces tend to be relatively short and highly concentrated.
Yeah.
Materials.
Yeah.
And I think it's my personality, I guess, but I just as a composer, I really don't want to waste the listener's time. I may only have the attention for a brief period, and I want to grab it as quickly as I can and hold on to it for as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want a listener to have the feeling that I'm improvising, that there's anything random going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'm not. I think that there are, there are a lot of similarities between my pieces, in that sense that they're relatively short, they're highly concentrated, they tend to be rather contrapuntal. I mean, that's my.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for interesting textures, things like that.
You said listener's time, and your pieces tend, as you said, tend to be maybe shorter compared to other composers who write very lengthy pieces. But it seems like a true pieces for the 21st century, since more and more you hear that the audiences either don't want to attend concerts or find some of the pieces to be too long, too boring. And this is their language, not mine. I love listening to all kinds of different styles and genres in classical music. But having said all of that, how have audiences changed in your perspective, in your view, from when you were doing this 20 years ago or 30 years ago as a young man and now as a mature composer and a musician?
Not that I'm really aware of.
Yeah.
I have to say that it's not something I think about a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing to please my own ear.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
I don't think my music has ever been particularly popular or anything like that.
Yeah. Why do you think it hasn't?
Who knows?
Huh.
I don't know. I don't think of it as being particularly daunting in terms of dissonance. Or it's I don't know.
Composition, I find it to be probably, and again, this is my opinion, but the hardest in the music field. It's so subjective, and there's so many composers out there. And how do you judge a composition, especially in the 21st century?
Well, especially after one listening.
Yeah.
Most how many performances? How many compositions receive one performance and that's it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a daunting proposition.
Yeah, and but you've been successful in getting some of these, the Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship and Rome Prize. How did those come about, and what was your approach? Because from what I understand, those prizes, they give you an opportunity to take a time off or to be in Rome and compose a piece, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, sheer dumb luck is how I got those things. I guess I wrote pieces that were pleasing to somebody, and I really think it's kind of a crapshoot.
I think I told you, but I had George Walker on, the composer George Walker, and I asked him about the Pulitzer Prize, and he said, well, my son, he did the application, and he filled it out, and then I won, and there's nothing special. He talked about it like there was nothing special about it, but, it still is a prize, and it shows that you've done something, some contribution to the musical world, even though I have mixed feelings about competitions in general, but it's still a great honor. What did you end up composing when in Rome?
I wrote two pieces that are actually on recording. So one is called Cloche 2.
Yeah.
And it was, had this vague allusion to church bells in Rome. Mm-hmm. Cloche being the French word for bell. Mm-hmm. And the other one was, I'm trying to remember, Still Raining, Still Dreaming. I finished that up when I first arrived.
That is a gorgeous piece. I heard that maybe 4 or 5 times on YouTube.
Thanks.
Amazing. What inspires you now to do what you do?
Well, I'm currently writing my first overtly political piece.
Okay.
It's a piece for piano trio, and it's titled Unprecedented Act.
Mm-hmm.
Misspelled. Unprecedented Act in quotations. Misspelled.
I see.
With an S rather than a C after our buffoonish presidents. One of his tweets.
Yeah. You seem like that shows me that you're active. And actually, one thing before I get to that is, I try to search as much as I can about the people I talk to, because I want to get to know as much as I can. And one thing I realized is that you're not a very social media active person. I try to find some kind of juicy information that you might not have in your bio or the Wikipedia page or these other articles, but I couldn't find much about you. So this is actually really interesting, because now I could ask you some questions about that. So you're very active politically.
I don't know how active I am. I have strong opinions.
And writing a piece that shows that you are affected by what's going on. That's why you're trying to show it in one way or another. People talk about music. They say it affects people. It does all these different things. And others say that it's just music and it's just notes. What will you show through your music that is going to be political? Or what is it just a title, or is there more to it than just a title?
The famous quote by Stravinsky pops into my head. He said it in one of those books. Music is powerless to express anything at all. And I think he meant that in a kind of Zen kind of way.
Yeah.
Music in and of itself is just pitches, rhythms, or timbre. And we all bring our own baggage to hearing a piece of music. So a piece that I'm saying my piece is I'm saying it's political, but it's purely abstract. There's no text. I mean, I do have indications or markings in the score. Whiny yet aggressive, angry, belligerent, loud, ugly grunts, bombastic, sneering, things like that.
Yeah.
Just suggestions to the players how to play the piece.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's some sections are fairly ugly for me, more dissonant than usual. But anyway, what was your question again? Sorry.
No, it's great. I love hearing you talk about your work. But, you have these feelings, these emotions about what's going on in today's world. What can we do as artists to give the future generations a better life, or to give ourselves a better life in today's world? What can we do as artists?
Well, stay active politically. I mean,
What does that
advocate for what you're interested in.
Yeah.
I just I don't know, in terms of our work, I'm not sure that there's anything really. I mean, I suppose there are some very high profile composers who could make a splash in some way, but for most of us, it's just expressing our opinions.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that writing a piece of music that's political will have any effect, really, but it's satisfying to me. It's a way to express dismay that I feel daily. So
I want to go back to another topic that's always interesting and fascinating to me with composers, is revisions. And you've done a few revisions to some of your pieces from what I saw.
I'm not sure about revisions. I've kind of recomposed or recast older material. I have what comes immediately to mind is a set of songs. I don't have very much vocal music in my catalog, but there's a set of 4 drinking songs.
I've heard those, yeah.
And they're quite, I would say they're kind of easy listening. I do have kind of two, along that line, I do have kind of 2 sides to my musical personality. I mean, every once in a while I do like to kind of take a break and write something that's relatively simple, something that's tuneful. So, for instance, in that on my first CD, there's a piece called Uncle Inferno for piano, 6 hands, and that's very light, kind of Stravinsky. And on the second CD, there's a piece called Spoon for vibraphone and celesta, and that's also quite almost minimalist, and these drinking songs, they're quite approachable, quite easy to listen to.
Have you ever been in a situation where you composed a piece for a specific group and then they played it and you said, well, I want to make these changes now that I've heard the piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's the piece for 8 players called Cloche 2, and it's largely taken from an earlier piece called Cloche, which was for piano quartet. And I basically heard the piece performed and didn't like it very much and kind of cast it out of my catalog.
Yeah.
And rewrote it. I was much happier with that second version for 8 players.
Yeah.
In terms of revision, I don't actually do very much revising.
Yeah.
As I said, I will recast some earlier material in a new way. Often it's unsuccessful.
Yeah.
One recasting that did work was an earlier piece for a piece called Roulade for flute, harp, and string trio. And I took that movement and rewrote it extensively for a piece called Clarion Shadowing, a trio of clarinet, violin, and piano. And the Roulade basically became the first movement of Clarion Shadowing.
Yeah.
And I mean, the skeleton of the piece is there, but it's very much rewritten. That's a recasting that actually worked well, I think. And others didn't work so well.
Yeah. What's on your playlist now? What do you listen to when you're not composing or, doing the various other things that you do? What do you listen to? What's on your playlist right now if we were to open your computer or iPad or whatever you listen to?
At the moment, since I'm really obsessed with working on the piece, this piano trio, I'm not sure I'm listening to much of anything. I mean, before I started writing this piece, I was listening to a lot of piano trios just to get some ideas. I love the Ravel piano trio. It's really one of the masterpieces of the 20th century. And there are a couple of sensational performances on YouTube. I actually listened to one of your podcasts with the, forgive me, I can't remember his name. He's in New Zealand.
Gardner? Yeah.
Yeah. And he mentioned, you started talking about Zappa, Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
And he recommended an album of Frank Zappa, and I've always liked Frank Zappa. I mean, another wonderful guitarist. But really, such a creative musical mind.
Yeah.
And so underappreciated.
And I wish you had your camera on, because you could have seen I'm wearing a Frank Zappa t-shirt right now. I love Frank Zappa, and he's a great inspiration to me. And both, one thing I liked about Zappa, and I wish there were more artists like him today, in today's world, is that he was not only a great artist and musician, he was very thoughtful in everything that he did, and he was very prolific too, but he was also very aware of what was going on in the world, and he was very outspoken about what was happening in the world. That's something that I feel like is lacking with some of the respected artists of this generation. What do you think?
I think you're probably right.
Yeah. I wish there were more Zappas out there, but I'm happy you listened to that one, because it's really an interesting podcast, and I'm actually going to have him back for the 50th podcast. So, and the plan is to talk primarily about Zappa. So I hope it works out. That's our plan for now. But having,
I guess you mentioned that you were hoping to conduct some Zappa, and I understood that it's a lot of the orchestra material is really difficult.
At first, it's very difficult. A lot of the orchestra material is difficult on paper, but it's also just difficult to get a hold of because of the Zappa family.
That's shocking. That's really
a
shame. Ridiculous.
Yeah, but and it's also a problem with today's orchestral world, because I think the music is possible to play, but at a high level, but today's orchestras, especially when it comes to the non-standard orchestral rep, they give a couple of rehearsals for a piece and then they premiere it. They don't or they perform it, and they don't care to really dive in and really spend a lot of time with compositions, you know. And I see this with, maybe you've had different experiences, but I see this even with certain chamber ensembles or even soloists, you know. When it comes to a Beethoven violin concerto, they'll practice for 15 years and still work on it. But when it comes to some of the newer composers, they practice for an hour or two, and all of a sudden they're ready for a performance.
Yeah, it's understandable on many levels.
It's understandable, but I wish there was more care, especially coming from a music perspective. I sometimes understand the audience perspective, because maybe the new composer's name is not known and they don't really care too much for it. But I just wish the musicians cared for it a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of great pieces out there, and I think there are many wonderful contemporary composers like yourself. I just wish the musicians gave a little bit more, because sometimes...
Well, I think they're there. Not to disagree with you entirely, but there are a lot of really great and caring musicians.
That's true.
Out there. I mean, I'd be nowhere if there's a group in Boston called Dinosaur Annex.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And they played, I don't know, they must have played 7 or 8 of my pieces over the years.
Yeah.
And especially their pianist, Donald Berman.
Yeah.
And their former conductor, Scott Wheeler, had been big supporters of
yeah.
mine. I don't know where I would be without them.
So there are great people out there. I just, sometimes the audiences, from what I've seen, are disappointed with pieces, and I don't really know if it's fully the piece that's the problem. Sometimes it's the performance. So it's on both sides. I know there are so many wonderful performers, dedicating their life to performing new repertoire and really tough repertoire. But
we're blessed in Boston to have a lot of really fine players. I mean, we even so lucky to have this group, BMOP, Boston Modern Orchestra Project, with Gil Rose.
And that's been going on for a while, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, it must be 15 years at this point, or close to it, something like that. And they're really good. They're really good. I mean, it's just it's largely a pickup band, but he knows who to ask, and they do a great job.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they're gonna record 2 orchestra pieces of mine in the next year or so. Looking forward to that. But they're really fine players.
Boston has always been a place where there's a lot of great music and arts happening, and it's interesting because it's, as far as size of the city, it probably is around the same size as Seattle, right?
I don't know, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, Boston's not that big. I mean, certainly under 1 million.
Yeah. And so much great music happening at all times in Boston.
Well, a lot of, so many music schools.
Yeah.
That's it.
What's your advice to young musicians?
Find that's a broad question, but try to study with people you admire.
That's,
I don't know if I have anything more
no,
to say
that's
than
great.
that.
That's great. How about these are some questions that I try to ask all the people who are my guests, but a life-changing musical moment, if something comes to mind, whether you were young or in your early 20s or whenever it might be.
Well, I go back to that concert by Eliot Fisk that I heard when I was a freshman or sophomore in college. In terms of pursuing classical music, that was it for me. I'm trying to, hearing when I was at Yale School of Music studying classical guitar, I had friends who were composers. I was interested in what they were doing, and for the first time, I heard Steve Reich's music, music for 18 musicians.
Yep.
And the piece just totally absorbed me. I was fascinated by it, and I think there is definitely an influence of minimalism in my music. I don't use it the same way that Reich or Glass do, but it's there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I didn't hear a live performance. I was actually recording.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, I've heard a number of brilliant performances over the years, but I can't think of a single key performance that.
Yeah. So any pastime activities, non-musical?
Music is my passion and my hobby.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that a lot.
Yeah.
Especially these days.
Yeah.
But I think anything to escape our current political situation.
Yeah.
I really need to be working. And, I don't know. What do? I read. I like movies.
Yeah.
To be perfectly trite.
Well, it's been great speaking with you. Anything that we missed that you want to talk about? I'm sure there's many other things, but anything that comes to mind that we didn't get to?
Not off the top of my head, no.
So what's next? The trio is next, and was that a commission, or who's performing the trio? That's
it's not a commission. It's just something I've been writing a bunch of. I've been writing some pieces of which are rather impractical.
Mm-hmm.
I finally decided that I have to write some more standard pieces for standard instrumentation. So that's the reason for the piano trio. I have in the back of my mind some players, but I haven't even mentioned the piece to them.
Yeah.
So, and I wrote 2 string quartets. Before this, I wrote 2 string quartets. I had written string quartets since I was a student.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally got back to that, and the Lydian quartet is going to play both of them in December.
Oh wow!
And so, other than that, these the orchestra pieces that I mentioned with Beam Up, that's basically what's going on at this point.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was
to talk to you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, and I hope we do this again at some point. It'll be great. Maybe after the premiere. I really want to know what the response is for that piece now.
For which one? The piano quartet?
Yeah, the trio. Yeah.
Trio. Sorry.
It'll be great to see what is said about it by the press. Hopefully they'll cover it, and hopefully you get a lot of performances.
Thank you. My fear and my at the same time my hope is that I'm not going to finish the piece in time for it to be relevant. my hope is that somehow, it will become irrelevant.
Whether things change, hopefully for the positive soon, or not, the piece will definitely have its importance. No, I'm sure it'll be important for people.
I don't know about that, but thanks for saying that.
Thank you so much, and have a beautiful day, and hopefully we'll actually meet in person someday.
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Tigran.
Thank you.